On a quiet street in Philadelphia, a man spent his Saturday mowing the lawn. He felt fine. He was fine. What he didn't know was that, on paper, he was dying. A local hospice had signed him up for the final months of his life. But hospice isn't a place you check into. It's care that comes to your home. So while he trimmed the hedges out back, perfectly fine, the company was quietly billing the government for his final days. He wasn't sick. He wasn't special. He was just one name on a very long list because the man who ran that hospice had found a loophole in the saddest corner of medicine, and he was turning dying into a business worth millions. The only thing standing in his way? A handful of nurses who knew the truth. To understand what he did, you have to understand the thing he did it to. Hospice might be the gentlest idea in all of medicine. When someone reaches the end, when the treatments have stopped working and the fight is finally over, hospice steps in, not to cure, just to comfort. To keep a person warm and out of pain in their last months, usually right at home, surrounded by the people who love them. And here's the part that matters most. For the dying, it's free. The government quietly picks up the bill so that no family ever has to choose between comfort and bankruptcy in the worst week of their lives. The whole thing runs on trust because, honestly, who on earth would lie about this? Enter Matthew Kolodesh. He owned a hospice company in Philadelphia called Home Care Hospice, and where you and I see a kindness, he saw a faucet. Here's the only piece of money math you need for this whole story, so hang on to it. The government pays a hospice for each day it cares for a dying patient. That's it. One dying patient, 1 day of care, one payment. So if you own the hospice, every patient on your list is a small daily check arriving from the government like clockwork, which means the more dying patients you have, the more money rolls in. Hold on to that one simple fact because it's the crack the whole crime crawls through. Because Kolodesh had a problem. Real dying patients have a way of, well, dying. And the moment they do, their little check stops forever. So how do you keep the money flowing? You stop using dying people. You sign up people who aren't dying. Think about it. A healthy person put into hospice doesn't pass away in a few weeks. They stay on the list for months, sometimes years. A steady little check rolling in the whole time, which is exactly how a perfectly healthy man ends up billed as terminally ill while he's outside mowing his lawn. But there was a guard at the door. To get into hospice at all, a doctor has to sign off. A doctor has to look you in the eye and certify that you are truly near the end. So Kolodesh didn't fool the guard. He bought him. He paid doctors, slipped them money for every patient they sent his way, sick or not. And when the one person we trust to tell who's dying is quietly on the payroll of the man running the scam, the gate isn't a gate anymore. It's a turnstile. And it wasn't one doctor doing one favor. This was a pipeline, a steady supply of referrals, greased with cash, feeding healthy people into a system built for the dying. The more names the doctors sent over, the more the checks came back. And everyone in that chain had a reason to keep the names coming. And once the patients were in, there was a second, richer move. Most hospice care is calm and routine, and it pays a modest daily rate. But every so often, a dying patient takes a sudden turn for the worse, a real crisis, and needs a nurse right at the bedside for hours and hours, almost around the clock. That kind of intensive care costs a lot to provide, so the government pays a lot for it. It's the premium button, and Kolodesh pressed that button over and over for patients who were never in any crisis at all. On the records, a nurse was glued to a bedside through a long day and night of emergency care. In reality, the nurse was never there. The crisis never happened. It was a number typed into a form, attached to a check. But a scam like this has one weak spot: paper. A healthy patient's file says healthy, a calm night says calm, and those files are the only proof the government ever actually checks. So an order came down through the company: fix the files, make the patients look like they're dying. And not in some vague way. Staff went back and rewrote the nursing notes by hand, inventing symptoms that were never there. A fever here, an infection there, steady weight loss, a body slowly breaking down, all of it sketched in after the fact to match the story the billing needed to tell. On paper, home care hospice was full of fragile people in their final days. In real life, a lot of them were going to be just fine. And this is where the story stops being about money and starts being about people, because somebody had to actually write those lies down, not Koladesh sitting up in his office. The nurses. And the order to fake those files didn't come out of nowhere. It came down a chain, from the owners at the top, through the company's managers, all the way down to the nurse who ran the nursing staff, the person whose whole job was to protect patients, passing along the instructions, to lie about them. The people who took this job for the most human reason there is, to sit with the dying and hold their hand at the very end. And now they were being handed a healthy person's file and told to document a death that wasn't coming. Most of them went along with it. It's a paycheck. It's your boss telling you to. It is so much easier to just look away, but a couple of them couldn't. Two nurses, Maureen Fox and Kathy Gonzalez, looked at what they were being asked to do and refused. First, they did the reasonable thing. They reported it inside the company, up the chain, the way you're supposed to, and the company's response told you everything you needed to know about what was really going on in there. One of them was fired. The other was pushed until she quit. That was the price of telling the truth. Most stories would end right there, with the honest people gone and the scam rolling happily on. But these two had one move left, and almost nobody knows it exists. There is a law in this country, a strange and rather beautiful one, that says an ordinary person who catches someone stealing from the government can do something extraordinary. They can file a lawsuit on the government's behalf, in secret. The case is sealed, hidden away, so the person being accused doesn't even know it's coming, while federal investigators quietly take the whole thing apart behind the scenes. It's called a qui tam case, and it turns regular people, a receptionist, a bookkeeper, two nurses, into the eyes that the system doesn't have. So, Fox and Gonzalez, fired and pushed out for telling the truth, used it. The case went under seal, and the quiet investigation began. For the two nurses, none of this was fast. A sealed case can sit hidden for years while the government quietly digs. So they waited, out of their jobs, watching from the outside, hoping the thing they had risked everything to start was actually moving. And by early 2008, the walls were starting to close in. Medicare had begun asking questions, and the company was suddenly staring at a demand to pay some of the money back. And that's when home care hospice did the one thing that gave the whole game away. In a single stretch, it discharged 128 patients. Remember the healthy people billed as dying, the man out mowing his lawn? They had become a liability, so all at once, they were suddenly well enough to go home. You don't cure that many dying people overnight. You let them go when someone is finally checking, and once investigators finally started reading those files for real, the whole thing came apart. The invented symptoms, the phantom nurses, the healthy people billed as dying. In October 2013, after a 4-week trial, a Philadelphia jury looked at all of it and reached its verdict on Matthew Koladesh, guilty on every count that mattered: conspiracy, 21 counts of healthcare fraud, and 11 counts of money laundering, because he hadn't just stolen the money, he had funneled millions of it straight into his own life. Renovations on his house, his son's college tuition, a luxury car, all of it, in the end, paid for out of a fund meant for the dying. He called it care. The jury called it fraud. The judge sentenced him to more than 14 years in prison and ordered him to pay back over $16 million. He appealed. A higher court read the whole sorry story and agreed with every word. And Koladesh didn't fall alone. His co-owner, the company's CEO, the executive who tried to obstruct the audit, the senior nurse who ran the floor and had her staff fabricate the files, all convicted. In the end, nearly 24 people were charged. An entire operation built to bill for people who weren't dying. which makes the two who refused stand out even more. In a building where going along could land you in a courtroom and saying no could cost you your job, Fox and Gonzalez found the one move that did neither. They didn't just keep their hands clean, they picked up the one thing that could end it. And underneath all of it sat a simple, ugly piece of math. Every dollar that flowed out for a healthy man mowing his lawn was a dollar pulled from a fund meant for someone who was genuinely dying. And it's worth sitting for a second with what was really stolen here. Not just the money, though it was millions. He stole a promise. The quiet promise a society makes that when you are at your most helpless, in the final days of your life, someone will care for you and not cheat you. He found that promise and ran it through a billing machine. But here's the part I can't stop thinking about. The thing that finally stopped him wasn't some brilliant government computer scanning for fraud. It wasn't a watchdog or an algorithm. It was two nurses, two people with bills to pay and families to feed, who decided that a steady paycheck just wasn't worth their name on a lie. The biggest systems in the world can be fooled by a neat stack of paperwork. It takes a human being close enough to see the wrong and stubborn enough to say something to actually stop it. And if this finally made hospice fraud make sense, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.